Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier. I was hyper excited about this fight, and boy, did it live up to the expectations. What a shark pool that lightweight division is in the UFC. I mean, does it get any better in terms of how much talent we have there? Look, I won't lie. I tipped Dan Hooker, and that's a bit of my Australian New Zealand allegiance coming to play there. But obviously, any win against Dustin Poirier was going to be always very hard fought in that regard. But man, did we foresee the quality of what this actual fight was going to entail and actually deliver as an output? I don't think anyone had. And before I begin, like, just a conversation and a brain dump in terms of the 25 minutes of pure mixed martial arts perfection that we saw, let's give a hand, guys. Like, legitimately, that's fight of the night, fight of the year rather, material. And that's saying that after we saw last week in terms of Josh Emmett and Shane Burgos. I mean, what's happening? Since COVID, we've seen all fighters turn up to fights, and we've seen fight of the night, fight of the year candidates from almost each particular card. It's been amazing. This UFC Apex run in particular has really seen a lot of these fights, prepare and really promote really fantastic results. And I'd have to say, I think that this smaller octagon is definitely having a part to play here. Look, guys, before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, give us some support, give us a like, put some comments below. But let's dive straight into it. I think straight off the bat, when both fighters were fresh, we could see that the narratives play through in that if this fight was going to be fought at range, man, Hooker looks sharp. And moving forward, regardless of the fact that he didn't necessarily, win this fight, he's a real contender in this particular weight division. And purely because what they're doing at that city kickboxing gym in New Zealand is extremely special. And I think, Luke Thomas, paid homage to this. But the ability to feint and really drive sort of direction and lay traps, I think Dan Hooker talked about this, but I don't necessarily think that we see a lot of this happening there. But Dan Hooker is definitely a master of the rangy sort of fighter, and obviously he's a rangy fighter. And he was peppering those calf kicks really early and often against Dustin Poirier, and we were seeing, a lot of effort and damage there. I mean, you say what you want about Dustin Poirier in terms of his ability to fight maybe one particular sort of dimension in terms of the stand-up, but man, when you get fights like that and when you get opponents that are not willing to back down, you see that. And we've seen that before. He beat Gaethje that way. He beat Alvarez that way. I mean, he's an amazing technician and loves these brawls. He absolutely loves these brawls. He lives for it. And let's talk a little about that later on. But I guess the short of it is, in the first two rounds, let's escalate it. The main apex of these fights were these phone books like exchanges of dirty boxing when they were in the when they were pressed against the cage, and often it would be Dustin, and they were going at these extremely manic exchanges, and they were brutal. This was an exhibition of absolute mixed martial arts brutality in the best way possible. We saw like two really equal opponents in that particular regard in the stand-up really go at it and just employ different sort of tactics. So yeah, look, in the first couple of rounds, I would say that Hooker on totality was getting the advantage of these exchanges, and I think none of this was more punctuated at the end of the second round, where I think it was the end of the siren, where Hooker was just laying it on him, and really it was the end of the siren that kind of, I would say saved Dustin rather, maybe not necessarily, but he was getting absolutely cleaned up. And the amazing thing that the first two rounds entailed was the absolutely manic pace that both individuals were able to employ. And I think, peeling back the layers of this fight from a pure striking technical perspective, when they were really fresh, there was no doubt in the first two rounds that, the ranginess and the feints and the tools and the calf kicks of Hooker were really playing on the mind of Dustin. But man, say what you want about Dustin Poirier in terms of potentially how quick his fight with Khabib was, but man, that guy has a chin and a real petulant for these wars. And again, I bring back the Justin Gaethje sort of fight. Very similar sort of fight in terms of the output, the sort of stance. And really, these are fights where you think, wow, it's 50-50. It's like on a knife's edge. But what Justin really has is he really enjoys being in these, monumental, titanic, stand-up wars, for the lack of it. And he has the ability, I don't know what's in that melon of his, but he really does have the ability to absorb a lot of damage and give it back. I think that's the thing about Dustin. He has the ability to fire back even though he's absorbing it. And again, we saw so many examples of that throughout the fight. Look, in the third round is the actual beginnings of the rounds where you saw the guys depress the pedal. And again, the output was really strong. It just wasn't at the same rate that the first two rounds were coming out. And obviously it kind of makes sense. And it wasn't until, we saw different sort of scrambles and a couple of submission attempts by Dustin, when they engaged on the ground, that we really saw the elevation and basically the experience of Dustin to be able to be in fights like this really kind of flow through. And I think I tweeted this, but the conclusion of the third round to me was not necessarily the beginning of the end, but really where it showed a step up. And this is the thing, there are levels to the game, and Dan Hooker is really knocking out that door. This is a fight that Dan Hooker is going to look back in a couple of years' time, and if he makes it, he's definitely got the talent, he's got the team there, he just needs to put it together. There's definitely no fight in Dan Hooker's career that he took to the absolute red line that happened tonight. And I think basically in the fourth and fifth, he kind of ran out of gas. He wasn't able to drive that level of output. And importantly, Dustin was able to really integrate level changes and get takedowns when it was needed and really show an active guard. I think from the bottom, he was trying submission attempts. He had guillotines. He had an armbar attempt. And if anything, here we saw the diversity and really the very diverse skill set that Dustin had that was able to put Hooker at bay. And really, you've got to understand, in a fight like this where you really lay out the majority of your output, at least in terms of your pops and of your strengths, throughout the course of these 5 rounds, both individuals were getting touched up, but it really looked like Dustin was wearing these punches better. I mean, they both did not look good, but at the end of it, you could see there was labored breathing by Hooker towards the third, fourth, fifth rounds, and obviously there was labored breathing by Dustin, but he was really relishing it. And there's no greater example than, I don't know if it was in the third or the fourth round when he sat down. I believe it was the third. His cornerman asked him, "How are you going?" He's like, "I'm loving it. I am loving it." In the heat of the battle, he's able to acknowledge that he's loving it. And I think, again, this fight was fought at such a torrid pace. There was amazing examples of everything. You had crisp striking, you had tactical interplays, you had submission attempts, you had the mixing of, striking to wrestling to takedowns. Oh my goodness. I don't think I've ever seen better exhibitions and executions of in the pocket phone booth, just absolute swingings. And I think I'm going to reverse it back to that first round. The first exchange of these in the pocket exchanges, Dustin was, and the word was calm. I think Bisping or one of the commentators noted it. In line of fire, he was using reflexes and throwing things back. It was absolutely amazing and a joy to watch. And in the fifth round, we really saw his championship pedigree in terms of Dustin Poirier. He wanted it more. He had the gas tank to do it more. He had been in fights like this to do it more. And I think he landed 61 strikes to around 14-20 as per the UFC stats. So he was really able to leave a punctuation mark in that fifth round and come away with a decision in what is, in my mind, the best fight of the year so far. And man, we've had some cracker of fights this year. So that to me leapfrogs, especially from the men's division, it's right to the top. I'm speechless. I'm actually speechless in terms of how quality this fight was and how high quality the embrace between these two warriors was at the end of it as well. Man, it was amazing. I'm speechless. I'm absolutely speechless. Look, I think moving forward, it's going to be really, really interesting to basically see who Dustin fights next, rather. He said in the interview that he wants to potentially fight next year. He doesn't want to fall out of love in the sport. So, to me, Tony Ferguson. I think a lot of commentators were saying it, and it makes absolute sense. You've got Khabib and you've got Khabib rather and Justin Gaethje fight for that. Imagine if Gaethje wanted. To me, a rerun between potentially Dustin if he beats Tony there just makes sense. You obviously have Conor McGregor lurking in the sidelines there, and that's an amazing fight. I love McGregor versus Hooker, but I don't see McGregor biting down on that. Man, lightweight is just tasty. It's an absolutely shark pool of a division and has produced some amazing fights. I mean, seriously, Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson was an amazing fight too. But just I think the equal levels of heat that were coming out of both these fighters made this just a little bit better from a spectator perspective. Anyway, guys, that's my recap and analysis of this fight. If you have any comments, please leave your comments below. Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you didn't like what you saw and heard. But please subscribe to the channel to support. Chat soon. Peace.